capture the heart and win the mind. Please take this mantra with you today. Well, artificial intelligence is so embedded in our lives. It is ingrained in our products, in apps, in healthcare, even in online banking portals that it's hard to imagine our lives without AI now. There's still an underlying anxiety and uneasiness that what if this AI becomes conscious or sentient? So, to avoid this dystopia, I would now like to invite on stage our next speaker, Radhika Krishnan, who is the Chief Product Officer of Hitachi Vantara. And she has also held multiple leadership roles at companies like NetApp, Lenovo, and Cisco. So please join your hands together for Radhika Krishnan.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can people at the back of the room hear me okay? Yes? Awesome. All right. So how is everyone doing this morning? That's a tough act to follow. I don't have movie clips. I will state that up front. Right. So reshaping the world, such a apropos theme. You know, what I'm going to be talking about for the next 15 minutes or so is actually very aligned with that, right? I mean, AI, we all know it's dominating every aspect of our lives. And so just by way of context, my day job actually involves everything data. So, you know, my organization and I are responsible for data in its various forms, ingesting it, you know, cleansing it, curating it, enriching it, and of course, you know, deriving insights from it using AI and ML. And as we've been on this journey, you know, it's become very evident that there is a good and a bad side. You know, it's almost like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sort of persona to AI, depending upon how it gets applied, right? So I'll spend a few minutes talking, illustrating with some examples. But before I do so, you know, my daughter always tells me every time I do one of these speaking events, Mom, you should open with a joke. And I always remind her, you know, data science jokes, half of them are below average. So, um, so with that, let me go to the next slide here. You know, yet another way where data can truly lead you astray, right? You know, here is an example. If you're concluding, you know, this individual lost 152 pounds, well, think again. The outcome is not positive in this particular instance, right? So the message here is, you know, data can really lead you astray if you're not utilizing it appropriately. Many of us have probably seen headlines about AI that are you know, making news on a daily basis, right? And there's any number of things that grab attention. Obviously, you know, there is concerns around China and the fact that they use facial recognition algorithms to detect sentiments among the population. Are you favorably disposed to the ruling government? Are you not? And so forth. So real concern around what's going on there. This notion of autonomous weapons, right? This is also starting to take center stage. And you know, on a related note, there was this article that came out about Libya, where apparently an AI-based drone took it upon itself to actually start attacking the soldiers, you know, just for no trigger at all, right? So here is a drone that was created to help beef up the defense, and instead it was starting to attack its own soldiers, right? So pretty bizarre stuff, and apparently it was pretty challenging. This drone had gone rogue, and it was pretty challenging to actually corral it and make sure that it wasn't continually harassing the soldiers. Countless other instances, right? You know, you can look at Twitter. I mean, this is another classic. You know, especially in the backdrop of, you know, the elections and various other things. Twitter had this image cropping algorithm that was very biased toward pale-skinned people as opposed to dark-skinned people. And so, just as a case in point, you have Mitch McConnell and Obama, and it would crop out Obama's image. Serena Williams and Sharapova, I would crop out Sharapova's image. Black Labrador and Golden Labrador, take a guess which one gets cropped out, right? So, fundamentally racist overtones to this particular application, right? IBM Watson, really good at handily beating Kasparov or winning a Jeopardy game, but when it came to cancer diagnostics, miserably fails, right? Lots of instances where the diagnosis, the detection was entirely off. And so on and on and on. And one that I think is particularly comical is this news item about a football game in Scotland where apparently the camera was AI-based and was instrumented to be pointed at the ball, which is essentially a shiny object. So shiny object ball, and the camera was trained to point at the shiny object. Well, lo and behold, it turns out that the referee had a bald, shiny pate. And guess what got televised for the next 2 hours of that football game? So it was, and what was even more comical was the response for the next time, right? And apparently the referee got told to go wear a toupee or a cap so that incident didn't repeat itself, right? So lots and lots of episodes of where AI can create this very dystopian universe. And this is just the stuff that makes the headlines. There's countless others, right? Many of you probably know about the Microsoft chatbot that, Tay, that became very misogynistic, anti-Semitic, and so on and so forth. Amazon, had a resume scanning application which would essentially look for women's colleges, women's sports, and if it detected that you were a female applicant, it would automatically disqualify you, right? So on and on and on, and this is just the stuff that's making headlines. Now, what about all those instances where you don't even know what's happening under the hood, right? And that is, by the way, a reality, because if you think about it, everything, a large part of our lives are being screened through AI, right? Case in point, you apply for a loan. There is an AI model that is actually actively assessing your creditworthiness. Your kid applies to college. There is an AI app that's actually assessing your kid's college worthiness, right? And so on and so forth. And then when you think about the fact that these AI algorithms inherently have some challenges in them, you're essentially your future, your kid's career, your kid's future, everything is hinging upon how the screening happens, right? So that is the not so great side of AI, which leads to more of a dystopian sort of universe. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. So let me talk about the good side of AI, right? And there's very many reasons why AI should continue to get promoted, propagated, so that we're able to take advantage of some of the very fundamental capabilities that it can bring to the table. One of them, and there's a couple of examples here that actually my organization and my employer were involved in, and I was going to touch on them to give you a feel for some fairly interesting use cases where AI has really affected very material change, right? Now, the first of these I'm going to talk about is rainforest. I don't know how many of you know this, but apparently every 2 seconds, a rainforest the size of a football field is illegally deforested. It's staggering, right? And when you think about the impact of it, well, what happens? First off, this illegal deforestation is contributing to 10% of carbon emissions on the planet. Number 2, it is actually causing very many species to become extinct. It's causing the depletion of indigenous reserves. It's causing droughts all across the universe. I mean, all of us talk about global warming, or at least there is a lot of talk about global warming. And so fundamentally, this illegal deforestation is leading to a lot of very negative outcomes for our planet. And it's really not an easy problem to solve for. Think about the rainforest, the density of the rainforest. You know, an illegal logger gets in, starts to cut down trees. How are you really going to detect it? I mean, when you think about the acreage, you know, the density, the spread of these rainforests, there really isn't an easy way to do this. And this is where enter AI. And so what we've done working with this organization called Rainforest Connection is there are solar-based sensors that actually sit on top of this rainforest canopy, right? And these sensors can actually pick up acoustic signals. And the really cool thing is, you know, so it can sense, you know, it can pick up signals of a chainsaw, it can pick up signals of the flora and fauna around the rainforest. And it's continually picking up these signals, and it is, you know, alternately, it's applying convolutional neural networks to either, you know, process the acoustic signals at the edge or, you know, relay it back to a data center where, you know, it's being analyzed, right? Well, the net of it is, usually if there is a signal of a chainsaw getting picked up, you can very, very quickly notify the forest rangers. They're able to intervene, and they are able to stop that illegal forestation from occurring, right? And so, you know, no other way to really solve for this other than, you know, using this combination of IoT sensors and AI. So pretty cool. Another example, you know, and this is one where it's honestly of human interest sort of angle. Japan, lots and lots of kids go through school getting bullied. And I think this has become a very prominent theme, you know, especially with social media. It's not just Japan, everywhere, all across the globe. You know, teenagers are subject to bullying, hazing, you know, all kinds of things because, you know, it's part of the whole social media thing. And in particular, there was this school in Otsu near Tokyo where, you know, there was an 11-year-old, a middle schooler, that could not handle the bullying and ended up taking his own life. So really, really, really tragic situation, right? And so the school district at that point took it upon themselves to implement AI that essentially allowed them to correlate patterns across, you know, their social media activity, you know, the absenteeism, their academic performance, their interactions with their peers, and so forth, and got to a model which was pretty darn accurate in terms of being able to predict, you know, who was getting victimized by this bullying, right? And so the great news there is, you know, the number of suicides have dropped, the absenteeism has dropped, you know, students are thriving and prospering and doing much better, right? So it's really, really cool stories, and then it goes on and on. You know, there is instances of where this has been used in the medical field, in the healthcare field, multiple ways that AI is making a material positive impact in our society, right? So, and this is the utopian side of AI, if you will, that is allowing our society as a whole to become, you know, richer, better, more sustainable, and so forth. So what is the, so what is the distinction between the two, and why does AI lead to utopia in certain instances and dystopia in other instances? And the answer really comes down to, you know, how do you implement ethical and explainable AI? Ethical really coming down to the morality of it, and explainable coming down to, can you actually understand it in human terms? The speaker before me spoke about sentient AI. Now, this is really just a glimmer in the eye at this point, right? I mean, the notion of sentient AI, or what is referred to as anthropomorphic AI, hasn't quite evolved to that point yet. And so fundamentally, you know, if I don't know how many of you watched this movie Coded Bias, Netflix. You know, if you haven't already watched it, check it out. It really brings home the fact that there are fundamental challenges in the way data is being used, in the way that AI models are getting applied. right? And so you really need this combination of ethical and explainable AI to be able to address that. So what can we do? We as a collective technology community, what can we do to ensure that, we're channeling this toward a utopia, not a dystopia? And the answer really comes down to, half of it is awareness, right? Knowing that there is the potential for AI to have these negative side effects is a great starting point in and of itself. Now, the second thing to be also aware of is fundamentally machine learning and deep learning go off of patterns, and they lean into homogeneity, right? And so fundamentally, that goes against, so if there is a bias in the data that is being used, then it is going to get reflected. It's actually going to perpetuate that bias in the recommendations that it makes. And how do you really prevent that? Well, there's a few different ways of doing it. One is, really making sure that, you take a grounds-up approach to it, not an academic approach, because, there's many countries that are going down this path of regulatory enforcement for AI, and fundamentally what they're realizing is, you can't really use a sledgehammer to solve for this, right? So you need a grounds-up approach. And it's really very use case based, right? So it's very specific to the industry, it's very specific to the use case. And so having coalitions and consortiums that focus on that particular area and coming up with guidelines that allow you to ensure the right things happen also becomes very critical. The other thing as well is, just having governance bodies becomes important. And really making sure that the data scientists and the product managers are incentivized to ensure that what they develop is ethical and explainable becomes critical as well. And then the last recommendation that universally pops out that I actually feel very passionate about is ensuring that there is diversity in your teams, right? And so this is something that every one of us can do, is ensuring that we're building diverse teams, because believe it or not, study after study after study has proven that diverse teams actually lead to diverse, much richer models and much more rational logic and recommendations, right? So diversity becomes very critical, much as we all like that homogeneity in our teams as well. Hiring more females, hiring more people of color, hiring more of the, well, let's not just go to Berkeley and hire the data scientist PhD, but instead to step back and say, well, how can we infuse that diversity in our organization, has actually been proven to be the single biggest differentiator when it comes to ensuring that your AI works the way that it should. So in conclusion, we really want to ensure that AI leads us to utopia, not dystopia. And so it's incumbent on every one of us to ensure that we take the right steps to ensure that we get there. All right, with that, I will end it here.
All right, thank you so much. A huge round of applause for Radhika Krishnan.